Hello again. Today we're going to be going through base products. So I'm going to look at my foundations as well as my concealers and decide if there's anything in my collection that's no longer serving my purposes. I'm not going to be doing primers because I only have 3 of them and I don't feel the need to declutter any of them. So we're going to get started, jump right in with the foundations. While I do enjoy the convenience of powder foundation, I find that it's pretty limited in terms of what time of the year I'll wear it. In summertime, I find that it's a little bit too high risk in that if I start to sweat, it can really disturb the foundation and become very obvious on the skin. And then also in winter, when my skin is at its driest, sometimes the powder foundation just makes me look that much drier. All that to say, I really don't think that I need to keep both of these because they don't get very much use throughout the year. And this one is definitely the oldest. I can see the ridges of the pan starting to form through the powder, but this is the one that I'm going to say goodbye to because it is so old. Both of these powders are very finely milled and very smooth. Both of them do offer a good amount of coverage for being a powder, but I'm going to give the edge to the Fenty, and that is the one I'm going to keep. I have 2 foundations from The Ordinary. One, we have the Coverage Foundation, and this one here is the Serum Foundation. In terms of price point, you really cannot go wrong. If I recall correctly off the top of my head, when I purchased these, they were about $6 each. That price might be up a little bit now because everything is up in price now, but that's at least what it was a couple of years ago when I bought these. Now, with them, I do enjoy them both. However, my preferences in terms of makeup have changed and I'm no longer really enjoying a lot of full coverage foundation. And the Coverage Foundation from The Ordinary delivers on what the name suggests. It does offer a lot of coverage. And I wore it recently and I just found that it was far too much for what my preferences are. So I'm going to be getting rid of this one. However, I am going to keep the Serum Foundation. As you can see, I've got quite a good amount of use out of it already, and I may as well ride it out with this one. I do like how lightweight it is and how it wears throughout the day. I have 2 little babies over here, just little samples. One is from Laura Mercier, the Real Flawless Weightless Perfecting Foundation. This sample is in the shade, I don't know, it does not say. Well, that's not particularly helpful. This one here from House Labs. This is the Triclone Skin Tech Foundation, and this is in the shade Light Neutral. I have got a couple wears out of each of these. They both apply really nicely. It just comes down to finish for me. The Laura Mercier looks a lot more natural on my skin, whereas the House Labs, although it does blend out really nicely and it does look nice on my skin, it has a much more matte finish that I just don't really jive with. If they came out with a more like luminescent version of this foundation, I would be very curious about that one. But this just doesn't suit my purposes. So I'm going to keep Laura Mercier and I'm going to let the House Labs go. Next up are the 2 stick foundations that I have. So one is the complexion stick from Merit, which I have in the shade Linen. And this is the foundation stick here from Basma. This is in the shade 31. I'm going to be keeping both of these. The Merit one, it is very lightweight. There's nothing greasy about this product, and it does last nicely on the skin all day, which I do find to hold true for most of my lightweight foundations because they are so thin and because they offer such light coverage to begin with. I find that the effects of the day on the makeup are far less noticeable than when you have a full coverage foundation. The Basma foundation here offers more coverage than the Merit does, but that's not to say that it takes it to the high coverage level. It just offers a bit more than what the Merit does, and I really do like the way that it looks on the skin, so I am going to be keeping that. Next, I want to talk about these products, which I don't really think they fully qualify as foundations, but they also offer more coverage than what a primer does, so I don't really consider them to be a primer. They're kind of a strange little hybrid, but I really enjoy both of these products. So on the one hand, we have the e.l.f. Halo Glow Liquid Filter, which I have in the shade 3 Light Medium. And then this one over here is the Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Perfector 4-in-1 Glow Makeup. They really do need to workshop that name a little bit more. Anyways, I have this in the shade Light. So both of these basically just enhance my skin. They both just add a very realistic but a very pretty glow to the skin without adding any coverage. In particular, the Glow Perfector here from Maybelline, it really does not add any coverage whatsoever. I can't even really say that it works to even out my skin tone. All it really does is make my skin look incredibly supple and hydrated, and just adds a tiny bit of a glow to make it look super healthy. This one here from e.l.f., it does add like a tiny little bit of coverage, but I certainly wouldn't rely on this if you're looking to mask any perceived imperfections on your skin. It does basically achieve the same thing as the Maybelline with just a little bit more to it. If I had to just pick one, I would go with the Maybelline, but because I like both of them so much, I am going to keep both of them. We'll talk about these three next. So we have the Stay Naked Hydromaniac from Urban Decay. We've got the Bare Look Tint from YSL. And then over here from Armani, this is the Neo Nude Glow Foundation. Armani is shade 4. YSL, I have it in shade 5. And then shade 30 for Urban Decay. All of these are fairly similar one to the next. They are basically like skin tints. They offer more coverage than, say, the e.l.f. or the Maybelline do, but they aren't as full coverage as most foundations would be. These are sort of my go-to level of coverage for foundations at this point, and I really do love all three. All three of these achieve essentially the same thing. They really just even out your skin tone and offer just a very small amount of coverage. All three of them have a natural finish on the skin. You're not finding anything mattifying here, but nor are you finding anything with a lot of added glow and radiance to it. These all just look like my skin, but better, and for that reason, I'm going to keep all three. Next, we'll talk about the Makeup by Mario Surreal Skin Foundation, which I have in the shade 3W. This is quite possibly my favorite foundation that I have. It just looks beautiful on my face. It gives my skin such a healthy glow without being shimmery or glittery. It wears really beautifully throughout the day. I can build it up to about a medium level of coverage, but just going in with 1 to maybe 1.5 pumps of this provides a nice amount of light coverage while evening out my skin tone. I think this is a beautiful foundation. This one, on the other hand, really did me dirty the other day. I don't remember this being a problem when I first got it, but when I wore this the other day, it oxidized so badly that I was actually embarrassed to have been out in public looking like I had been, because it was very much Oompa Loompa-esque. So there I am in the bathroom at my office with toilet paper kind of wiping off my face to just try to tone it down a bit. So all that to say, I'm not going to be keeping this. I have 2 foundation balm products here. So this one is from KVD. This is the Good Apple Balm, and this is in the shade Light 21. And on the other side here, we have another product from Makeup by Mario. This is the Super Sculpt Skin Enhancer in Light. As you can see, I have gotten a lot of use out of this. It is beautiful. Again, the name says it all. It's a skin enhancer. This really doesn't add coverage. It really just boosts my own skin to make it look as healthy as possible. It just takes my skin to the next level. There is no way that I'm going to declutter this. The Good Apple, you can see the texture difference, right? So this one, it just picks up a very smooth amount like that on my finger, whereas this one is much more moussey, if you will. So this one, it's a little bit harder to work with than the balm because you can overload with product very easily with the KVD. Having used this and loving it as much as I do, I just don't feel motivated to use this one at all. So I'm going to be decluttering the KVD, but obviously keeping the Makeup by Mario. We're taking a trip to the drugstore here. So we've got the Illuminance Skin Caring Foundation from Revlon. This one I have in the shade 117. Then we have the Bear With Me Blur Tint Foundation from NYX, and this one I have in light neutral, shade 4. And then finally over here we have the Essence Pretty Natural Hydrating Foundation, which I have in the shade 30 Neutral Ivy. One of these is getting the boot, the other two are going to remain. So the Revlon and the Essence, I both really enjoy these foundations. The Revlon foundation does sort of remind me of the Makeup by Mario. I give the edge to the Makeup by Mario because it just looks that much prettier and that much more sort of glowy on the skin, again, without being shimmery. But this Revlon one is not far off. It does offer a little bit of illumination to the skin, again, without being greasy or looking like it's glittery. And it does offer a light amount of coverage, but still evens everything out the way that I want it to. It lasts really beautifully on the skin all day as well, so I'm definitely keeping that. The Pretty Natural foundation from Essence says what the name says. It is pretty natural on the skin, not particularly glowy, not particularly heavy coverage. It just is my skin, but better. However, this one here from NYX, I actually wore this yesterday just to refresh myself on it, and it did perform the same way that I remember it performing when I first picked it up, and that's not well. It oxidized a little bit on my skin throughout the day, nothing near the level of the Makeup Forever one, but it did oxidize a bit. It also just sort of clumped in weird areas to make it look really dry. Over the course of the day on my nose, it really spread out and mottled. There was a lot of that sort of mottling across my forehead as well. It just doesn't hold up throughout the day, and I'm not going to keep it. All right, we talked drugstores, so now let's talk the opposite end of the spectrum. So over here we've got from Lisa Eldridge, the Seamless Skin Foundation, which I have in shade 6. And then this one here is the Backstage Foundation from Dior in 2W. I think 2N would have worked a little bit better, the more neutral option. This one is very strongly yellow. It can work when I have a tan in the middle of winter, not as much. But having said that, this is one that works really well mixing it into a moisturizer because it is a higher amount of coverage. So mixing that in with the moisturizer just creates a really nice lightweight coverage product, and it tones the yellow down that's in here and makes it far more workable for me. So I do like using it in that way. I do like it on its own when it matches my skin tone, and I have got quite a bit of use out of it. I can't really see through the bottle, but I can feel that there's at least half of it's gone. I am going to hold on to this one because I do like how it looks on my face. Likewise, I'm going to be keeping this one from Lisa Eldridge. I did have it in a project pan throughout the beginning portion of this year, but I ultimately gave up on that. It was just too much coverage for me in the summertime, which isn't to say that it is a high coverage foundation. I would put this more in that realm of medium, buildable up towards full coverage. So it is more coverage than what I typically use, but I do like it in winter time and leading into spring. It's just it was too heavy for me in the summer, so I'm going to be keeping it. These two foundations here I'm going to be parting ways with. One is the Natasha Denona Foundation X Full Coverage Fruit Complex Foundation in 25W. And then over here we have the Pro Longwear Foundation from MAC in NC20. While I did used to really enjoy both of these foundations, I just don't enjoy the level of coverage that both of these provide anymore. So I'm going to be saying goodbye to them. Then we have these three here, which are more like skin tints than traditional foundations. So on the one hand here we have the Bounce Skin Tint from Beauty Blender. This I have in the shade Light 4. Then from Fenty Beauty, this is the Easy Drop Blurring Skin Tint in shade 3. And then finally we've got the Rare Beauty Positive Light Tinted Moisturizer, which I have in 14W. Of these three, the Beauty Blender is my favorite. I think it just looks really beautiful and really natural on my face. Again, all three of these are offering a very light amount of coverage, but again, with that, I find that it's a very subtle difference from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Two of these two do hold up really nicely throughout the day. I've always struggled with the one from Rare Beauty. I'm not sure what it is. It just does not hold up on my face throughout the day the way that I would want it to. And so I am going to get rid of this one. I love a lot of the products from Rare Beauty, but I have not personally had much success with her base products. The concealer, her other foundation, and then this tinted moisturizer. They just don't hold up well on my face throughout the day for some reason. So this one, it's time to let go of. But I am going to be keeping these two because I just think they look beautiful on my face. I've got these two products here. So this one is from Florasis, and I can't tell you what it's called or what shade it's in because I can't read the lettering. N20, that's all I can get out of the shade, but there's no other information on it. This one I did receive in PR. And then over here we've got the Makeup Forever Water Tone Skin Perfecting Foundation, which I have in Y245. This one is very light in tone, and while it does work in like the very dead of winter when I have the least amount of pigmentation in my skin, otherwise throughout the course of the year I really can't get any use out of this. And while the foundation itself is a very nice lightweight consistency, it still shows up on my skin as being quite light. And while I can work with it and I can deepen it up using bronzer and other products, I just don't feel like I want to put that much effort into my foundation, so I am going to send this one on its way. And then with the Water Tone Foundation, it also shows up lighter on my skin, but because it is so thin in consistency, I don't find that it has the same lasting cast on my skin as the Florasis one does, so I'm going to be keeping this one. Now the opposite can be said about this. This was a sample of the Maracuja Juicy Glow Foundation from Tarte, and this is 24N Light Neutral. Light neutral typically does work for me, although my preference is light golden, but light neutral certainly does work. But this one, I'm not entirely sure that they got the memo on what light really means, because it is quite deep for being considered light, and it's just a bit too much for my skin to handle, and it is even deeper than what the Dior is, so this little sample is going on its way. And that's going to bring us down to the last three bottles, and now that I'm looking at it, I should have included that when we were talking about drugstore foundations, but I missed the boat, that's okay. So over here we've got the Sephora Best Skin Ever foundation in the shade 12Y. This one is the Scream Queen foundation from Milani in shade 200 Nude Beige. And then finally from Il Makiage, this is the Woke Up Like This foundation in shade 40. I am going to keep these two. These both perform actually very similarly on the skin, although the Il Makiage does have a little bit more of a thicker consistency to it. Not to say that it is thick, it's just thicker than the Sephora. Both of them hold up really well on my skin all day. Both of them have a very natural looking finish, and both of them I would say are up to about a medium in coverage, potentially buildable beyond that, but that's sort of what you're working with straight out of the gate. While I do love my lightweight coverage, I do want to have some medium coverage options for quote-unquote special events. I don't live a life where I have a ton of special events, but when I do have social gatherings and whatnot, I do like to put my best foot forward, and these kind of foundations fit the bill. Not to end on a negative note with the foundations, but I am going to be decluttering the Screen Queen from Milani. I'm just not in love with it. It's a little bit thicker still than the Il Makiage. It does offer medium to medium full coverage. It is very pretty on the skin as well, but it just doesn't hold up all that well throughout the day on me and can look quite dry by the end of it. So I'm going to say goodbye to it. Now on to concealer, and I don't expect we're going to be at this for very long because I did a concealer declutter probably 6 months ago or so, and so we're already working with the cream of the crop here. But having said that, again, I have been sort of rotating through these, gearing up for this video, again, to refresh myself on everything. And there are a few that I know that I'm going to be saying goodbye to. But there are some that are absolutely not at risk of going anywhere. For example, this one here from Dior, this is the Forever Skin Correct in 2N, as well the Lancome Teint Idole Ultra Wear Concealer in 250. Both of these are very high coverage. Both of them wear so beautifully throughout the day. There's really no cakiness with them. There's no creasing with them. They hold up well throughout the day. They are not going anywhere. Frankly, the same can be said for these three as well. Over here, we've got the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Concealer in the shade Nougat. And then we've got another one from Dior. This is the Backstage Concealer in 2N. And then the Stay Naked Quickie Concealer from Urban Decay in 30NN. Again, all three of these, I only go for things that say full coverage because I have such dark circles, so that's what you're going to see repeated here. So again, full coverage, but hold up really well all throughout the day without disappearing into my fine lines, without looking all dried up and flaky under the eyes. All three of these are great options if you're looking for a full coverage concealer. Now this one here from KVD, I believe this is the Good Apple Concealer, but without a freaking microscope, I'm never going to read that sticker. I have it in shade Light 105. It says lightweight full coverage concealer. I would agree with that. And it does hold up nicely, although it can look a little bit dry under my eyes, so I always make sure that I add a bit of moisturizer underneath my eyes before I go in with this. But this is a shade issue for me. It is a bit too light for my skin, and it can sometimes be workable, but I have to spend a lot of time making sure that I blend it out. I have to remember to put it on first before I put my foundation on so that I can really sort of cover the edges. It's a lot easier to cover it up with foundation than it is to blend it on top of foundation. So it's just too much effort for me when I already have a drawer full of concealers that I love. So this one is exiting the collection. I find that these three concealers are also very similar to each other. We've got the Benefit Boing Cakeless Concealer in shade 3, Sephora Best Skin Ever Full Coverage Concealer in 12Y, and then the Conceal the Deal Full Coverage Concealer from Lawless, which I have in Linen. Again, we're getting full coverage from all three, and again, the longevity throughout the course of the day is there. All of these, again, I've sort of pre-vetted these like 6 months ago, so I'm not really expecting to declutter a lot of them, and they've all been selected for that same reason, that they offer full coverage and that they hold up. If they didn't hold up, I wouldn't be keeping them, so I'm going to be keeping all three of these. Also, shout out to Benefit for like really cute packaging here. I love that it's got the little eraser on it. Although arguably the eraser would be better suited for the erase paste from Benefit. This is a color corrector. This is in shade Fair. I honestly cannot remember the last time I reached for this. I now have, as you can see, a full stable of full coverage concealers, and I just don't find the need for the color correcting anymore. I've had this for years. So even if I wanted to use it, I'd be a little skeeved out to do so. So it's time to say goodbye. And that's going to leave us with our more drugstore options here. So we've got the Maybelline Superstay Activewear Concealer in shade 15. Then we have the Milani Conceal and Perfect, which I have in the shade 125 Light Natural. And then over here from The Ordinary is the High Coverage Concealer in whatever the foundations were. It was the same numbering, 1.2 YG. I do like both of these. The Superstay is a little bit more of a thinner consistency, a little bit less coverage, but still a lot of coverage than the Milani. The Milani I have loved for years, so these two are staying in the collection. This one here from The Ordinary, I don't really use it all that often. However, I do really like it for when I'm filming eye swatch videos because it blends out so easily. So I'll use this just to touch up underneath my eyes because doing eye swatch videos requires a lot of makeup removal, so I need something that I can just throw on really easily, and I would also rather do it with like a $5 concealer than with a $40 concealer. So this serves the purpose for that, even though I don't really wear it on an everyday basis. Alright, so I started off with 33 foundations and I am decluttering 12. And I started off with 12 concealers and I am decluttering 1. And then this is just sort of in its own little category and obviously is also being decluttered. So I am parting ways with more than I anticipated, but I do feel quite confident in the decisions that I've made for all the reasons that I gave throughout this video. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being.